Hello, welcome to the series of lectures on essential statistics for data science. I'm Hemakumar Kausala, and in this video, I wish to introduce you to role of data collection in statistical studies, types of statistical studies, namely observational and experimental, with illustrations, understanding of confounding variables, and role of sampling and assignment in statistical studies. Let's get into the video. The statistical data analysis process discussed in the previous video highlights the importance of data collection and data analysis. Neither very carefully gathered data without precisely executed data analysis, nor precisely executed data analysis without carefully collected data can result in an acceptable or useful statistical analysis. Carefully collected data and precisely executed data analysis are both required for acceptable results. The correct understanding of the problem under the statistical study means raising the right kind of questions and seeking the answers. The right kind of questions decide the type of statistical study being carried out. There are two types of studies. One, observational, and two, experimental. Types of the statistical studies. Observational. For example, the study aimed at establishing the relationship between the gender and average height from a sample extracted out of a population under study. This is an observational statistical study because the study is conducted on specifically collected data on various characteristics of the population as seen in the sample, and conclusions arrived or generalized to the entire population. Similarly, the study aimed at estimating the average check-in time of the students per grade from a sample extracted out of the students' records from a primary school in a locality. This is also an observational statistical study because the study is conducted on specifically collected data from the school records as seen in the sample, and conclusions arrived or generalized to the entire school. The study may also be aimed at comparing the average check-in time of the students per grade among the schools in a region. This is also an observational statistical study because the study is carried out based on collected and available data from various school records as seen in the samples per school, and generalizing the conclusions on the entire school records belonging to all the schools under the study. Thus, the observational statistical study is all about exploring one or more of the characteristics or variables of a sample out of a single population and generalizing the conclusions from the sample onto the entire population. Or comparing the characteristics or variables between samples out of two or more populations and generalizing the conclusions to all the population under study. The questions that decide in choosing observational study are something to do with exploring the details, patterns, and relationships within a population or comparing specifics across the populations. On the other hand, experimental statistical study is to do with establishing the cause and response behavior between the characteristics or variables within a sample out of a given population. Identifying the factor or explanatory variable or variables that can have a causation effect, in other words, an influence on a response variable within a sample out of a given population. To understand the experimental statistical study, let's consider a case study that can be executed using both the methods and judge the constraints that arise in observational method as against the experimental method when the study is especially about understanding the cause and response phenomena between the characteristics or variables within a given population. Let's get into the case study. study is about a cigarette smoking population who want to give up smoking. The study involves selecting 1,000 smokers at random from this population, each of whom 6 months back chose one of the following four methods to quit smoking. 1. Choosing to quit abruptly without depending on any means to assist quitting. 2. Sought medical intervention via some drugs to quit smoking. 3. Sought therapy or counseling mechanisms to quit smoking. And 4. Chose both drugs and therapy methods to quit smoking. Let's say 150 out of 1,000 chose to quit abruptly, just like that. And 300 out of 1,000 chose drug intervention to help quit smoking. Another 300 chose therapy or counseling means to help quit smoking. And 250 chose both drug and therapy means to help quit smoking. Note, some well-rounded numbers are chosen just to keep illustration simple. 6 months down the line, the people in the sample were revisited and the status on whether they have succeeded in quitting smoking, yes or no, were recorded. Accordingly, the study found 29 out of 150 who chose to quit abruptly only succeeded. Similarly, 120 out of 300 who chose drug intervention succeeded. 110 out of 300 who chose therapy succeeded. And 170 out of 250 who chose drugs plus therapy succeeded in quitting smoking. Tabulating the data thus far collected, we have the following, and calculating the percentage of success for each of the methods chosen, we get to observe these details. At 68%, those who chose the drug and therapy methods of intervention have succeeded the most in quitting smoking. Method is the explanatory or factor variable, and success, yes or no, is the response variable in this study. Method is the cause and success is the response. Drug plus therapy method or the factor variable seem to have the maximum influence on success, which is the response variable. This is an observational study because the study only observes the success rates among the smoking individuals in the sample who wish to quit smoking after a span of 6 months and generalizes the conclusions made out of the sample to the entire cigarette smoking population. Importantly, the individuals spontaneously chose the methods to follow, meaning methods were not assigned to individuals by the researchers. In other words, study did not apply any control over the individuals. While the sample of smokers from the population were chosen randomly, which is the appropriate method to choose a sample, the choice of who chooses which method was not done by the researchers, instead by the individuals as discussed. So what? There are some shortcomings. Let's explore them. What if most of those 250 who chose drug plus therapy means to quit smoking are among the most determined ones to quit in the sample? Perhaps the determination of the smokers who chose this method is the real reason than the means drugs plus therapy itself? Or is it that the determination worked all along assisting this method to succeed? The variable determination level is confounding with the variable method. The determination level is called the confounding variable. What if most of those 150 who chose just quit are economically and socially backward? Maybe they are surrounded by a lot more smokers that made quitting difficult for them. Social and economical factors are perhaps the reason for low success rate than the means just quit itself. The social and economical factor is the confounding variable in this case. Hence, the shortcomings with the observational study are the confounding variables, if present and are not addressed. The result is the conclusions are not reliable anymore in an observational study if confounding variables are not identified and not taken care of. However, there are ways to overcome the shortcomings brought in by the confounding variables. It is to identify the confounding variables and choose the sample from a population such that it mitigates the influences of the confounding variables. For example, choose the sample such that all the members in the sample belong to the same social and economical background and carry equal level of determination to quit smoking. That way, the confounding factors cannot influence any one or more methods selectively. On the contrary, an experimental study overcomes these shortcomings more effectively. In an experimental study, the assignment of methods to individuals is not left to individuals but controlled by the researchers. While the sample size of 1,000 individuals from a smoking population is randomly chosen, like in the case of observational study, the assignment of individuals to methods are done using random methods as against the observational study. The random assignment of subjects or objects from the sample to various methods ensures that confounding factors get distributed across the methods that avoids selective concentration with certain methods. Tabulating the data thus far in the experimental study and calculating percentage of success for each of the methods we have, at 72.4%, those who are assigned to drug and therapy methods of intervention have succeeded the most in quitting smoking. And this can be a more reliable conclusion since effects of the confounding factors are addressed effectively in the experimental study. So far in this video, we understand the two methods in the statistical studies. Which method to choose depend on the questions that we have at hand, and how to mitigate the confounding factors depending on the method chosen. Now let's look into the roles that sampling and assignments can have on the effectiveness of the results for each of the two methods of studies. The way the sample is collected and the objects are assigned to interventions and methods determine the effectiveness for each of the two methods. Accordingly, four categories emerge: not randomly sampled and not randomly assigned, not randomly sampled but randomly assigned, randomly sampled but not randomly assigned, and randomly sampled and randomly assigned. Not randomly sampled and not randomly assigned. Since not sampled randomly, the conclusions on the sample cannot be generalized on the population because the sample is not representative of the population and hence is not suitable for observational studies. When not randomly assigned, the confounding factors are not mitigated and hence is not effective for experimental studies as well. Not randomly sampled but randomly assigned. Since not sampled randomly, as just discussed in the previous case, is not suitable for observational studies. Since randomly assigned, though not randomly sampled, it can still work for evaluating the cause versus response relationship, hence is suitable for experimental study. Randomly sampled but not randomly assigned. Since sampled randomly, the conclusions on the sample can be generalized on the population because the sample is representative of the population and hence is suitable for observational studies. Since not randomly assigned, as already discussed, is not effective for experimental studies though. Randomly sampled and randomly assigned. Since sampled randomly, as discussed in the previous case, is suitable for observational studies. Since randomly assigned, it works effectively for evaluating the cause versus response relationship, hence is suitable for experimental studies as well. Overall, sampling and assigning effectiveness with respect to the type of the study looks like this. Hence, once decided on the type of the study, choice on the kind of sampling and assigning should be carefully chosen in order to have best results. That brings us to the end of the session on Introduction to Statistical Studies. Please leave your comments, questions if any. I'll try and revert back as soon as possible. See you in the next session. Until then, bye.